Evening everybody. It is, well, I'm filming this on Friday 30th of December, but this particular video will be going up on Saturday 31st of December, New Year's Eve. So the last Dram of 2016, not the last Dram of the challenge. I'll still have another 24 to go, but nearly there, in the final stretch. So hopefully you might be watching this just before you start some celebrations. You might be watching this in 2017. So what's it like in the future? Is it a lot better than it was in 2016? Because 2016 was pretty rubbish. Generally speaking, personally, my year has been fantastic. The challenge has been absolutely marvellous. I have a new baby son. It's been a pretty good year, personally. It could have been better, but then all things could have been better. But that's more of a much more personal thing to me, which I might touch on at a later date. So, last German of this little run. So we'll finish off 2016 finishing off German, which have been different and unusual, and I'm hoping this one's going to be different as well. And I'm going to do 3 tonight just to get myself over the weekend, just so that I can spend a bit more time with the family. And all 3 of them have been very, very kindly donated by the fantastic Tobias von Neubrunner. I nearly said your name wrong then. Who provided these 3 very, very different samples, particularly the next 2, which I'm quite looking forward to getting to. And this was actually commented on. Somebody mentioned it on my first German review, the Blau Maus, when somebody commented and said, "Oh, have you tried Glen Els? Because that's one of the few Germans that I've come across that's really, really good." And if you're watching, this is Glen Els, which does sound like quite an interesting German whiskey. Now, I couldn't find a lot of in-depth information about it, so I'll put my hands up and say a lot of the information I'm going to share from you is actually from the Whisky Exchange blog, from somebody that visited the distillery, I think, last year. So I'm pretty much lifting all of his text, because it was the only thing in English that I could find that was any decent information. So the distillery itself is in what's known as the Harz Mountains, which is here. And the company was founded in 1985 by the Buchholz family, who were producing I think they had a restaurant, but they were producing a herbal liqueur, which sounds to me like it was along the lines of something like Jägermeister. That's kind of herbal intense liqueur. And one of the sons of the family, a guy called Alexander, was asked if he wanted to join the company, but he was quite a big whiskey fan, so he came on board on the provision that he could actually do something different and produce a whiskey. So he joined in the late 90s, and from 2002 he started producing single malt whiskey. Now, it's still small scale. In 2015 they were actually in the process, when this article was written, the distillery was closed because they were actually in the process of doing quite a major refurb on it, essentially expanding the capacity. But it was less to expand the capacity, it was more to kind of reduce the working hours. So rather than doing 2 runs on 1 still, you could do 2 runs on 2 stills at the same time. You wouldn't have to do twice as much work. So it wasn't necessarily to produce more, well, that would be obviously a bonus. It was more just so that instead of doing 80 hours worth of work, you could do 40. But it's still relatively small scale. There's not a huge amount of it around. But what Alexander is quite keen on is casks. Very, very particular on casks. Willing to spend a little bit more for a better quality cask, to then make sure that what he has got, the quality is very, very good indeed. And there are crazy casks. There's kind of like, there's bourbon casks, there's sherry casks, but there's some really unusual wine casks as well. And what that results in is a number of different versions of Glen Els that's around. Now, Glen Els itself, I'm surprised it's still called Glen Els. It's named after the water source, which is the River Elsbach. So Glen Els is, if we were in Scotland, it would be the Glen of the River Els. Now, Blau Maus got into a lot of trouble when it was called Glen Maus, and I'm surprised nobody, the Scotch Whisky Association or anyone like that, hasn't jumped on the fact that it's Glen something. It's entirely possible that they are in the process of doing, but I am surprised that Glen Els has lasted this long being called Glen Els. And yeah, watch this space, because I would not be surprised if they have to change the name after the Scotch Whisky Association come down on them like a ton of bricks, because it's all about not making it sound like it could be Scotch or could be from Scotland when it isn't. So we'll see. So yes, this sample, and I think Tobias sent me another Glen Els as well, so I literally had to pick one of the two. So this particular one is the Glen Els Malaga cask. It's a single cask release, it's 7 years old, and it's 47.8%. So I'm hoping I can find a picture of the bottle, which is here. And the only place I found it for sale I could find a price for was the actual Glen Els shop website itself. And they were selling it for €80. So, it's a single cask release. Now, 47.8%, I wouldn't say it's cask strength, although it is possible. Because it's in the mountains, it's got quite a warm climate, and they lose more through the Angel share. So it's entirely possible that this is actually cask strength, with it being a single cask release. I don't know how many bottles there are. I couldn't find that one out. But yeah, actually thinking about it, if they are losing more, they're losing about 3 times as much as Scotch does because of the climate through the cask, through evaporation. So it is possible that this is cask strength. So no colourings added, but you can see already a really deep dark colour. So let's give this a go. I do like my heavily sherried whiskies, so I'm hoping. Now, what I don't know is exactly what cask it is, with it being called a Malaga cask, because I thought I was going to cough really badly then. I'm not aware of anything specifically called Malaga. Malaga is a place in Spain. I think I've been there, in fact. So unless it's a particular kind of offshoot of sherry or not, I don't know. But the coloration on this, there is no colouring added, there's no chill filtration. The colour on this, to say that's a 7-year-old. Now, admittedly, it's a 7-year-old in a warmer climate, but that is something hefty. That really is. So, yeah, I'm assuming it's some kind of sherry cask, and with the colour on that, probably something akin to Pedro Jimenez, or something quite rich and sweet. But we'll see from the nose. Wow. Yes. Really rich, really kind of stewed plums and raisins and sultanas, and it's quite Christmas cakey, Christmas puddingy. And I've had a couple of arguments about, I personally find bourbon casks more of a dark fruit intensity, more of a fruit cakey element than I find most sherry casks, which tend to me to be a little bit lighter. And this is kind of almost halfway between. I could nose this blind and go, oh, that's definitely a bourbon cask, but there is a slight light touch to it. There's a little bit more of a sultanery sherryness to it than there is the slightly darker, more intense fruit cakiness of a bourbon. But it's not far off. This is a proper sherry bomb. This is not a sherry bomb. This is a sherry nuclear explosion. This is intense as anything. I love it. I love that intensity of the sherry. If you don't like sherried whiskies, I would probably err on the side of caution on this one. I would probably look elsewhere. If you like sherried whiskies, even on the nose, you're probably going to like this. Now, when I had the Embrullo de Granada, which was the Spanish whiskey, to me that tasted more like a sherry that was a slightly higher alcohol percentage, that wasn't even 40%. And I'm sure, I can't remember exactly, and I'm not going to look at it now, but I'm sure Andrew, AP Butler, who provided me with the sample, said that the bottle was actually saying it was something close to like 46, 50%, so it was even stronger than I thought it was, which I find incredibly hard to believe. But I'm going to go with what he said. The Embrullo de Granada was more sherry than whiskey. It was very much kind of like, this is a sherry that's got some higher alcohol percentage, rather than this is a whiskey with such a degree of sherry that it tastes very much like it tastes more like sherry than whiskey. This is the other way. This is a whiskey with a really, really heavy sherry influence that you could almost give this to somebody and they would think it's a really high alcohol percentage sherry. It's so rich, so dense, so unctuous, almost liqueury. It's so rich and thick that I wouldn't have said it was 47.8%. I would say it's 43 or something like that, simply because of the richness and the physical thickness of the spirit doesn't imply that it's got that high an alcohol percentage. It does have a kick, but it's nowhere near what you would have think there's something close to 50%. It's even got the slight tannic effect of a really rich sherry, where you get almost a slight furry dryness, but it's a really pleasant. It's not a furry dryness like you're hungover. It's very velvety. It's textured. It's that ever so slight woodiness of a sherry cask that you get, as well as this rich, dense fruitiness from the sherry itself. This is what the Embryo de Granada was not, where it was obviously a whiskey that had a really heavy sherry influence. That was more of a sherry with a slight whiskey influence, and it was just a little bit too weak and too much towards the sherry end of the scale than the whiskey end of the scale. This is so heavily sherried. Somebody could try this and go, that's a really strong sherry, and it's not. It's clearly whiskey, and it's all the better for it. But if you don't like sherried whiskies, you're not going to go with this at all. If you like sherried whiskies, my God, this is going to rock your world. This is going to not just knock your socks off, it's going to knock everything else that you're wearing at the same time, because this is so intense and so full on and so in your face sherry. I love it because I love sherried whiskies. And I think this is quite possibly the most heavily, intensely sherried whiskey I have ever had. Bar something like Abelard Abu Nar. And even then, Abu Nar is like 58-60%. It's got the intensity, it's got the alcohol. With this being 47%, with this being kind of a lower alcohol percentage than that, this is arguably even more sherried, or more obviously sherried. I think it's phenomenal. I think it's absolutely amazing. The aftertaste that I get is the aftertaste that you would get after you drunk a very, very sweet, a full-on sweet dessert, really well-made sherry. I would love to know what cask that is, where they've got it from. That is totally an after dinner, after dessert, after pudding. In fact, as a pudding replacement after dinner. You wouldn't even need cake or fruitcake or anything like that. You would just need a glass of that. A really nice meal, and then you just get one of these glasses in front of everybody, pour them a glass of that and go, there you go, there's your dessert. You wouldn't need anything else. I think it's fantastic. It is not for everybody by any stretch of the imagination. There are some people that are just going to find this too rich, too sweet, too unctuous, too liqueur-y, too thick, too sherried. And I fully appreciate that. But if you like your sherried whiskies, that is something else. That is a joy to behold. Tobias, thank you very, very much for that. And that is a cracking whiskey to end 2016. To see in the new year, that is a fantastic way to do it. So what have we done? 4 German whiskies. And to be honest, it's more hit than miss. The Sleers was really good. The Bosch Edelbrand was unusual, different. The Blaumaus was a bit of a letdown, to be honest. Not to my taste, bit weird. From what I gather from some comments on my Facebook and everything like that, generally speaking, a lot of people do find that. But that Glen Els, that is something else. Now, don't work on the assumption that all the other Glen Els are going to have this flavour profile, because looking at the casks that they've got, it looks like there are some very different styles. But if that's an indication of the quality and the care and the attention that is put into each release, then you're on to a winner. And if there is now they don't do a peated version, but he does do some like the wood smoke. So he smokes the barley malt in a wood smoker and uses local like beechwood and a few other things. So there is a light smokiness to it, but it's a slightly different smokiness. Even though there's peat in the mountains, they don't actually use peat. So they're unpeated, but they still have the smokiness. And I'm not really picking up any smokiness on this, but But I think if they're doing things slightly differently, but they're taking care and attention and they know what they're doing, which I get the impression they do, and they're really passionate about it, you're going to get some really, really interesting, unusual, different, but very well-made whiskies from any of this range. So if you can find any Glen Els, I think it's well worth checking out. So don't work on the assumption that all Glen Els is going to taste massively heavily sherried, because I don't think it will. But I think there's going to be some really, really good whiskies in their product range. So Tobias, thank you very much. To everybody that's watching, Happy New Year. I hope 2017 is healthy, prosperous, enjoyable, fun, joyous, profitable, and you get everything out of it that you could possibly hope for. And I'm hoping that it's a much more positive and upbeat year than 2016 was, which generally speaking seemed to be pretty negative, pretty antagonistic, pretty aggressive. And didn't really show the best of humanity, it has to be said. So let's see if we can maybe group together and just change things, even if it's just in a little corner of the internet, just waxing lyrical about things that we love, be it whiskey or Disney or Bruce Willis films or whatever it is that floats your boat. Be positive. Let's just get some more positivity out there, positivity and love. And yes, people like different things, so what? Unless you are hurting somebody emotionally or physically, then that's fine. You've got different opinions, not a problem with it. So yes, goodbye 2016. It was nice knowing you to an extent, and let's see what 2017 brings us. Right, I shall see you in the next one. Cheers.